And we are live here on the MMA Industry podcast, December 5th edition. I believe that's correct. Yes, I'm already off to a good start. Got the date right. This is the podcast, if you haven't seen it, where we talk to people in the mixed martial arts industry, whether it's coaches, journalists, you name it. We really are just here to inform you. And I got a great guest today. He writes at MMA Fighting. He's a full-time guy. Alex Lee is joining me here on the program for the very first time. Alex, how the heck are you? Thanks for doing this, man.
Hi, James. I'm fantastic. Probably still a little tired from last week, as I'm sure you are as well. But yeah, honored to be being interviewed by James Lynch. One of again, you've interviewed so many people, so to be on that list is insanely cool, and I'm just very excited to talk.
Well, I'm happy too, because you and I have been trying to get together for a while. We both live in Toronto, and so and we both have very busy schedules. So I know we've usually in Toronto, I try to get all the media friends together. It's been tough getting you out. I know you've been busy, so this is kind of a nice way to kind of get a bit of that conversation going as well. And obviously the viewers get the benefit of hearing what you have to say as well. So I'm happy to have you on here. And the way I always start the show, Alex, is I like to talk about how my guest and I met, and you and I have met in person. It was almost about a year ago, UFC 206 in Toronto. I remember it very vividly. I got there really early to go to the event. This was the night of the fight. Of course, the Anthony Pettis and Max Holloway fight. And I got there super early, and I believe there was John Morgan and Ken Hathaway from MMA Fighting. And then I'm waiting in line, and then I see you come in, and I had never met you before, and I didn't know much about you at all because, back at your previous job, it's not like you were on camera or you had like a photo floating around or anything like that. But I found out you had worked at the Score, and you were doing mixed martial arts stuff for them. So we sort of met, and that was actually your first event. So that was kind of neat too, to like get you to see you experience your first event as well in Toronto, and that's how we sort of met. But pretty cool, huh? Time flies in about a year, huh?
It's absolutely crazy. And James, you're underselling your presence at this event for me, because obviously I saw you. You're a familiar face. Anyone who watches MMA interviews probably knows who you are. You do so many. I don't. I'll start bringing that up constantly. But I did see you, and I you were so friendly. You talked to me right away, and immediately I kind of latched onto you because I'd never been to an event as a journalist before. I'd been to a couple of events as a fan maybe, but definitely I had no idea what I was doing. So I'm like, okay, if anything goes wrong, I'm going to ask James. James seems to know what he's doing. James is a confident guy. There was other people who were there who were helpful as well, but I was definitely sticking to you. I think we sat cage side, at least near each other or next to each other for some of the fights.
At a certain point. So the way it kind of worked with me for that event was I was doing interviews in the back. So the undercard I was staying, and if you remember that event, they had the dining room and all the catering stuff in the back. And then we had this little small area to do interviews in the corner, if you remember, at the very back. So that was kind of interesting as sort of a tidbit to that. But I was in the back up until, I believe, the Matt Brown fight. And I specifically remember when I went to go get my seat, basically walking to my seat, and a second later, Donald Cerrone knocks out Matt Brown. So I got there. I think that was the co-main event of the card. So I didn't get to see too much live, but nonetheless, good timing to go to my seat. So
yeah, but again, I do really appreciate that help. And like I said, a lot has changed since then. A lot hasn't. I mean, like I said, I learned as much as I could that night, but it was just one event. I think the next time I saw you in person, I want to say it was at the Mayweather-McGregor Toronto.
Yeah, it was. It would have been that far later, because I don't think I would have seen you at any other. I'm trying to think if there's any other Toronto-related things. There was some media stuff, but that was at Sportsnet, so I wouldn't have saw you for that. But yeah, it probably was the Mayweather thing. But obviously we kept in touch over social. Oh no, hold on a second. We met before that. BTC. We were at BTC together. Remember?
Which BTC event was that?
That was the one at the Metro Center, because you were there for that. I remember.
Yes, and that was before. Sorry, I thought for some reason I thought that was after Mayweather-McGregor. That was before Mayweather.
Yeah,
McGregor.
no. Yeah, no, it's all good. So just goes to show, Alex not just covering UFC stuff, covering the local stuff as well. BTC is a local promotion here in Toronto. But let's talk about UFC 218. That's why I wanted to get you on here. I thought it was important to get someone who was there this past week covering the event like myself. First off, before you even went to this event, how was it sort of determined that you were going to go cover this card? Like, did you ask your editor, or did they offer, did they say, hey, we'd like you to go? How did that sort of work out?
Well, I'll tell you, my name was just put on a list. I actually, as far as I knew, when I signed on for this, to be with MMA Fighting, all if it was going to involve any on-site coverage, on-camera coverage. So when I worked at Score before MMA Fighting, for people who don't know, the Score is a content aggregation site. We do some original content as far as features and occasionally getting interviews, but a lot of it is, as a lot of sites are now, you take quotes and stuff from other sites, and you maybe put it in a different context, or you're just trying to share information and with the score, in the case of the Score app, which is a really good app, I'll keep promoting it, is the delivery method. So if you want your news fast, I definitely recommend Score app. They're good for that. I hadn't done anything for them in that sense, and I thought when MMA Fighting signed me, just to do the same thing, more interviews, more aggregation, and handling a lot of their news coverage for the website. Going to Detroit, I said, awesome. And I thought, okay, good. I'm sure I could do some live interviews there, but I wasn't sure exactly what my responsibilities would be. No, I had not requested it, but I'm very glad that they picked me and sent me.
Yeah, and I noticed that too when you were in the back during the media thing. I wasn't eavesdropping. I just happened to be sitting beside you. But I remember you talking to Ariel Helwani about you know, what you were going to be doing that evening. And I know you were a little hesitant to go cage side because you didn't want to feel like you were, you know, not doing your fair share in the back. But Ariel's like, no, man, go for it, enjoy it. You know, go to this event and stuff. So that must have been pretty cool to go out there in the arena and actually get to, you know, I know we were doing the play-by-play and everything else, but to actually be there cage side is pretty damn cool as a media member.
Definitely, and it's funny. I remember you bring up 206 last year. I had the same problem. I wasn't sure where to be because I did want to. I remember Anthony Johnson made an appearance in the back, and he wasn't fighting that night. He did a scrum, and I'm like, I should probably be there for that and get some quotes from that. So I was running in between. I missed as I was running around. I missed a lot of the Doo-Ho Choi part of Cub Swanson fight. So
right.
Think about how dumb that is, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it given a little more clear guidelines until I could stay cage side. I did have responsibilities for the site. I was doing some live blogging, so that was good. So I felt like I was doing work. It felt necessary to be there, and at the same time, I got to have an awesome seat, you know, right next to the action and enjoy what turned out to be a really good night of fights.
Yeah, it certainly was. And it's funny you mentioned that as sort of like how sort of everything's run. When I covered UFC 174, which you'll remember was the card in Vancouver, it was the Ali Bagotinov and Demetrius Johnson card. I was still pretty green. It was only my second event that I'd covered. And I remember when I went to the event, I just figured that all the fighters, so naive of me, all the fighters were going to be available after the fight. But really, as we know, the undercard fighters come immediately after their fight is done. The winners come to the very back. So I missed out on all this content. I somehow put something together for Sportsnet just from the post-fight presser, but I was so naive and I didn't know, and I didn't even think to ask, which was like a rookie mistake of, you know, sort of what the process is. But yeah, so I missed out on, you know, a bunch of post-fight stuff for that card just because I didn't know to stay in the back. So kind of my strategy ever since then has been, you know, stay in the back for the undercard. You might get to sit cage side for the main card, but if you want to get those interviews, if you want to get those, you know, as much content as you can, it's best to sort of stay in the back. So that's something I sort of took as a note. But the first day we got there, of course, was the open workouts. That was on the Wednesday at UFC 218. Really cool venue where they sort of host everything. It's called, I believe it's called the Fillmore or Fillmores. And just kind of reminded me a bit of like Massey Hall, but sort of a nicer, bigger version of it, which was kind of neat the way they set everything up. How was the media scrum for you? I felt it was actually pretty good for me anyways, because it didn't seem like there was a lot of media there that day. So we were kind of able to get in some questions and answers. How did you just sort of feel about the scrum that day?
I thought it was all right. I did like, again, I think you're saying like, I kind of benefited the next day because I didn't feel compelled to get in a rush to track down the 4 fighters who were involved in the workouts. Yeah. But at the same time, scrums are definitely not one of my strengths. There's an art to being in a scrum. I have not done that many in my life. I'm sure you and others, you know, others in our field have done a lot. So there's definitely it's almost like a dance with the fighter and also with the other. You know, you want to get in your stuff, and because you don't want to be just the guy who's listening and doesn't, you know, contribute to getting a good quote. But at the same time, you also know everyone's trying to get in their questions. So how many can you get in? Do you interrupt someone? Things like that. It sounds mundane, I think, to anyone who is listening and doesn't, you know, those scrums can get a little tense. I mean, we're all friendly. We all get along, thankfully. But there are moments definitely where I hesitated to get in a question, or I didn't get one, or I felt bad, like, oh, did I cut off this guy? But for the most part, got in what I needed to. But I wish, see, now I'm wishing I could have been more aggressive. That'll be kind of a theme during the week as we talk about it more.
Yeah, it's really tough. Sort of the rule I used is, you know, I'll try and get in the first question if I can, just because you never know if you're going to get to ask that question that you wanted answered. Because I'm sure you've had this happen too, where you're in a scrum and you have an idea in your head. You're like, okay, I'm going to ask this question. And then literally right before you're about to ask it, someone else asks that same question. So you always have to sort of think 3 steps ahead. And as far as cutting off, you don't want to be sort of rude or anything like that. But at the same time, you have to sort of butt your way in. There's like an art to it, I'd say. And it's something I have had to sort of develop over the years. I mean, I remember when I first started, I never never wanted to ask the first question. Now I know that I need to answer the first question just in case I don't get that answer that I want. So there's sort of an art to that. And the other thing I should mention is I always try and keep it to usually 1 or 2 questions max, maybe 3 if I'm, feeling sort of, if not a lot of people are asking things, but you don't want to overdo it. There's nothing worse. And I've seen this in scrums before where someone asks 5 questions. That's just too much. And you're not really being fair to the other people involved in the scrum. So that's sort of something I'm mindful as well. So there's definitely an art to the media scrum, especially, and the nice thing we had sort of with that day was that there wasn't as many media for the media scrum as there was for Thursday for the media day. So sometimes you are able to get a bit more content out of it, from the fighters, which is always good. But I'll mention for myself, I ended up getting a lot of good stuff from the scrum, not so much from Jose Aldo. He wasn't very talkative, and it's always difficult when you're doing stuff with a translator. But the benefit I had was I got all those fighters on the Wednesday. So the Thursday with media day, I didn't talk to any of them because I had already gotten pretty much what I wanted from those fighters. Did you talk to both on each day, or did you sort of pick and choose?
Well, first I want to mention Jose Aldo. None of us was going to get as good an answer out of him as our as our colleague from TSN, Aaron Bronstetter.
Yeah, Aaron Bronstetter, yeah, who's been on the show too. Yeah.
If anyone hasn't seen it, just look for Aaron Bronstetter's clip with Jose Aldo. You'll know immediately why it's hilarious and why I think it went viral. It went at least somewhat viral. It was incredible. So a mix of Aldo's sort of dry humor and the way he talks to people, and also the translator maybe being a little too literal, or I'm not sure how she handled it, but look for that clip. Yeah, as we said before, no, I left the, so on Wednesday, it was just me from MMA Fighting and also the video crew, the Esther and Casey, the 2 of the most brilliant people in the business. And Ara Helwani, really, I want to say, obviously, our big gun, I think, of MMA Fighting, he came in for Media Day on Thursday. So it made things a little bit easier for me. So I knew he was going to want to talk to Aldo and Overeem and Ngannou and Holloway and really everyone. So on that job, my day was to be a little bit more of backup, maybe get some of the periphery personalities, coaches. Raquel Pennington was there for, to support Tisha Torres. So that was nice. Got to talk to her. A lot of people want to know how she's doing after she had a pretty scary injury about a month ago. So my responsibilities were definitely easier. And no, so I did not need to talk to the 4, the main event and co-main eventers. And yeah, I was free to kind of roam. But it's a situation where I probably could have used a little more direction. Not to I mean, and that's on me. That's on me. I should have had a game plan going in and known right away. But I thought I'd be limited for options. But as you mentioned, it was a bit more sparse than we would have expected. You kind of had your pick of whoever you wanted to talk to outside of maybe Aldo and Holloway. But if you'd already talked to them, yeah, the other fighters, Sergio Pettis, Tisha Torres, Michelle Watterson, and them, they got freed up pretty quick.
Yeah, media day for me was really good. I got pretty much everyone I wanted. It was one of the few media days where I didn't feel too rushed. I think because I got all the fighters I wanted from the open workouts, so I was able to get every fighter I wanted. And on top of that, I was able to get some other fighters as well. Like I actually had time to spare, which never happens. I'll never forget when I covered 205 and I ran out of time, and I was so upset because I sort of had this not very good strategy of I'll just interview the undercard guys first, and then hopefully by the end all the main guys will be free. And I just ended up running out of time. So sort of learned my lesson from that. But I got all the fighters I wanted. I had a few issues. I might have mentioned this to you. So in my interview with Justin Gaethje, for some reason I thought I wasn't recording my audio because I use a separate microphone. So I pressed the record button partway through, and little did I know I actually turned off the mic. So there's a part in my Gaethje interview, if you watch it, where the audio sort of goes to the camera mic as opposed to the actual mic. So people might notice that. And then my Eddie Alvarez interview, like an idiot, for some reason I didn't record the video. Luckily I got the audio, so I was able to just put a photo over top and make a video out of that. But I was kind of, those were sort of the only 2 things that really sucked about media day, because I had only found out after that the video didn't record with Alvarez, and I'm not going to go back and interview him again just because I was like, well, I got the content I wanted. I don't want to bother him again. I mean, there's nothing worse than having to redo an interview. So I kind of just left it at that. But I had a really good interview with Michelle Watterson that went well. I'm a big fan of the challenge, the show on MTV. So it was neat for me to kind of interview her about that, because I've watched the show for seasons and seasons, and I got some really good stuff for the most part. I was there for Fightful.com, so I was able to get a lot of good stuff. They want sort of the wrestling angle with a lot of things, so that's why you'll notice in the Overeem scrum I asked about Brock Lesnar, because the audience for Fightful sort of wants that stuff. So I was able to get in a bit of things here and there, and I was pretty happy with how everything went. I had one little incident that happened at the media day. Not going to get into it. It involved a manager. Maybe I'll mention it on the show at some point. But if you were there, you sort of know which manager was there, and giving some people some hard time. At least he gave me a hard time. But that's that. That's a story for another day. And of course, we had Cyborg and Holly Holm as well, giving us some great stuff. And that was interesting too, because I figured they'd bring them out one at a time. They brought them out both at a time. So that was a little tricky too. I don't know if you had this issue as well, but so I went to Holly first just because I knew she'd give better answers. Just, she speaks English well, and, she's just very punctual or whatever. So I asked her right off the bat about the comments that Cyborg made about her being tested, and I got some really good answers out of that, and I was very happy with it. But the problem is, once you leave the Holly scrum, because there's a small group of media, I went over to the Cyborg scrum, and now I'm thinking in my head, geez, I hope, she doesn't have to repeat herself, because I have no idea what the other media asked her. That's the only sort of tricky part about it. Well, you do get sort of that, the smaller media presence, you don't want to annoy the fighter by asking the same thing. Did you find that as well? Did you have that issue?
Yeah, I had the dilemma. So I saw Ariel and the video team set up in front of Cyborg. So I said, okay, good. So I'm assuming they'll film some of Cyborg and then maybe come over here for Holm. So I'll stick with Holm until then. Holm and Cyborg, they must have both talked for at least well over half an hour. I could be wrong. Maybe the timing is messed up in my head, but it feels like they both talked for quite a long time. So they didn't, Ariel and the video crew didn't come back over until after. So I'm not sure how they decided to split the time. Again, they probably also didn't know how long. They might have thought there was going to be some sort of official break and saying, okay, we're going to, switch over the sides. And yeah, having them both go at the same time was tricky. So I only, for myself, got quotes from Holm directly. So I ended up writing something about Holm after, but I really couldn't write something for Cyborg because I could have used the video from our site, but at the same time, I know we didn't have the whole scrum. So definitely, and the other thing is I didn't want to go over to Cyborg for the exact same reasons you said. It drives me crazy and it usually happens on conference calls. I'm sure you've been on conference calls. Yeah. Someone maybe just even 5-10 minutes late and get the question in and then ask something that's already been asked, or worse, someone's been there but hasn't been paying attention to an answer, and then they ask the question. You just know they were zoned out and weren't paying attention. So you don't want to be that guy. I mean, we're all that guy sometimes, but you do everything in your power to avoid being that guy. So I stuck to Holm because I said, well, I know how this interview has gone, and when I want to get my own questions in, I know nothing bad will happen. But yeah, I essentially missed out on Cyborg personally. Yeah.
Another interesting tidbit, you talked about it there, is getting other fighters that happen to be there, or other people that were there at the media day. So I also got Raquel Pennington, got a really good answer to her. I don't know if you talked to her about this, but her and Tisha, I guess, went hunting with Darren Cruikshank. Did you hear about this?
No.
Yeah, so it was interesting. So I guess, and for those who haven't seen my interview with Tisha, but Tisha, I guess, is really good friends with Darren Cruikshank's girlfriend. Darren Cruikshank, the UFC veteran, trains at a Michigan top team, lives in Michigan. So I guess there was that connection there. So they actually went hunting, which was kind of neat. So I got to talk to them about that, because I'm always, when I'm doing these interviews, I'm trying to find stuff that's different, trying to find something that's sort of a bit human about them outside of fighting, because fighters get sick of talking about fighting all the time. So it's nice to kind of get outside the bubble. So I was able to get Raquel. I got Jason Perillo as well, who's Cyborg's coach. Had some really good stuff there from him. He was super nice. And then, so as this day's going on, I mean, I got like 10 interviews. I'm by myself, so I have to upload everything. I have to edit everything myself. So it's a really busy day. So I would have liked to get more interviews from people that were just around the hotel, because I sort of had a good strategy where I needed good Wi-Fi. I don't know if you saw my tweet, but my Wi-Fi in my hotel was awful. So I was trying to stay down at the fighter hotel as much as I could, because the Wi-Fi that the UFC provides us is really good. So I ended up staying at this table right beside the Starbucks. You probably know what I'm talking about. When you come downstairs from the thing, it's directly out there. But the benefit I had is the elevator's there to go up to the hotel room. So I saw all the fighters that were coming and going. So I ended up getting Dominic Reyes as well, who I interviewed before the fight, but I wanted to interview him in person. So I got him. I got his coach, Joe Stevenson, as well. I've been a big fan of Joe Stevenson for a long time, so it was neat to talk to him about that. Kevin Lee came downstairs, but it was at the point where I was already editing so much. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I'd love to grab him and get his thoughts on, what's going on, but I had to make a choice. It's either I grab him, or I'm setting myself back another hour to get this content up as fast as I can. So I opted not to take him. Didn't matter, of course, because we got the scrum with Kevin Lee on fight night. So luckily I had that. But there were a couple times where there were other fighters there that I would have liked to grab for interviews, but I literally was overloading myself, and I was like, I want to, at least get this up in a timely manner. So I had to sort of make that choice. But obviously in your guys' case, you guys work as a team, so you have that luxury of being able to sort of do that. So that's what happened from my perspective. How was the rest of your Thursday that day? Because we did the media day and everything like that. Were you up fairly late transcribing, or how did the rest of the day sort of pan out for you?
Yeah, definitely a lot of transcribing later. It's funny, I do want to mention a couple of mishaps that / bloopers or horrible things that happened on media day. As you said, I also had the failure to record problem with Sergio Pettis, my first interview of the day. I'm not sure what happened. I've had this recorder for a long time.
You talked to me about this. I remember. Yeah. Yeah. Tell the audience. It's great.
I mean, it didn't record. Yeah. Midway through, I thought I got it. So then I pressed the button again, and then I realized neither time did it go through. And so, you know, if Sergio sees this, obviously I want to thank him for his time, and I apologize for wasting 5 or 6 minutes. Thankfully, it wasn't a long interview for his sake. The other thing that came up was, you know, do you remember the Sijara Eubanks weight problem news broke during the media day? Now, I don't know if you got that information before you spoke to Alvarez.
I did not. No, it was, I had heard you actually talk about it, because, you know, you kind of roam around when you're doing these media things. I had heard it, I believe, just before Holm and Cyborg were coming out. So I actually got that a bit, I heard late compared to everyone else that was there.
So people had warned me, like, you know, Eddie's done a lot of interviews. He can be a really great personality, but you have to, as with any fighter, athlete, anybody you interview, you have to treat them with respect and give them a good question, you know, to open up, to get them to open up, right?
Yeah.
So I said, okay, you know, I'll be just really, really casual, really cool about it, and be like, hey, you know, Eddie, what's going on? Do you wish you were in Las Vegas, you know, helping out Sarge prepare for a fight?
Yeah.
And he's like, Sarge is out, man. And I'm like, oh, I totally caught off guard, because I had not, and the news had already broken. I had not been checking my phone during this whole thing. I was focused on looking at the fighters and things. And so he was, I don't know if it was Facebook living it or Instagram living it. He was doing some sort of stream. He turns the camera on. He's like, hey, look at me having to break the news to this journalist. Like, hey, this guy's oh, Eddie, you son of a. Yeah. But obviously, he's a good interviewer. He was just busting my chops, so it was fine. But just a couple of the silly things that happened that day, and but yeah, other than that, a lot of transcribing. Again, my week, as exciting as it was, probably wasn't exciting compared to other people. I would go to an event. I'd hang out with the crew after. You know, we hit a coffee shop, maybe get some work done there, and then anything that left to be done, just back to my hotel room, shut my door, and get that, just clickety clack away on my computer and try and get some content out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. I mean, the media weeks are fun, but you're working a lot. And there were certainly some days where I remember the media day Thursday, because I was having the issues with the internet. I had all these interviews I had to get up, and I had tickets to the Red Wings game, which in hindsight, not that smart, because I should have, you know, I would have rather had, you know, that time that night to get everything done and then go enjoy myself. But I was kind of interrupted partway through. I think I had 5 interviews up at that point, and then I had these tickets. I wasn't going to get rid of them. I got to go see the Red Wings play. I'm a big hockey fan, so I ended up going to that game. And then I had to come back after the game, had a few drinks too, and had to do the rest of my interviews. I didn't go to bed that night till about 2 in the morning, just because my internet was awful, and I had to get everything up. So Thursday was a very, very, very late night for me, but I only have myself to blame, because I should have. Well, the issue was the Red Wings only played the one day when we were there, so it was like, do I go? Do I not? But I'm glad I went, because, you know, at least I got to experience it. So that's one of those things you gotta pick and choose your time. It's always very valuable. Now, you were on the preview show with Ariel Helwani, which is a big deal for anyone. How did you find that out? Did Ariel just say, hey, we're getting you on? Did you want to come on? Did you know about this in advance? How did that come together?
I will say I was somewhat prepared, but I didn't assume I was going to be on. When I was told I was going, other than, you know, having to go to workouts and do the media day and be at the weigh-ins, things like that, which I assumed I would have to do, I did not assume that I would necessarily be on the preview show, because I'd never done anything like that before. So I know that generally the person who goes with Ariel, whether it be, you know, Mark Ramondi, Sean Al-Shadi, a lot of the other writers from MMA Fighting, generally they do the preview show with him. But I wasn't sure if it was because, again, they have experience with other outlets, and you know, I don't know a lot about my coworkers' backgrounds, as bad as that sounds, but I knew for me, I don't have that much experience. I hadn't been on camera doing anything like that since I was in school. So I thought, okay, I would understand if they just want to have Ariel do the show by himself. I completely understand. I'll make sure to pack some nice shirts, you know, just in case, and obviously get my hair cut. But no, I wasn't assuming anything. So, but I was prepared. I was prepared when they said, let's go, we're going to film this. And I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like my goal, you know, actually when I was coming out of school is I wanted to do on-camera stuff, and I enjoy writing as well, but I also want to be able to do both if possible. But I had an emphasis on camera. It's just, you know, it's difficult to get those opportunities in our business. So yeah, to get to do it for the site was so much fun. I was nervous. I don't know if you watched the first video, but my goodness, you know, I like the Micro Machines guy. I don't know if anyone gets that reference anymore, but I was just babbling and barely.
No, I honest to God, I watched it and I thought, man, you're holding your own. You're bringing sort of good stuff. And listen, it's funny you say that about the, you know, Micro Machine thing or whatever, the thing you were saying, implying that you were talking too fast. I'm guessing, is that what you meant?
Yeah, way too fast, definitely.
So Funny you mentioned that. I have no problem admitting this on air. I got the exact same message from our boss here at Fightful, Jimmy Van. He says, you know, you're doing a great job. Just slow down how you talk a little bit. And my issue is two things. And I explained this, and it wasn't an excuse. It's just kind of what we're dealing with here. But because, you know, this is in reference to media day, is for me, it's two things. Number one, I generally talk fast as it is. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm sort of, you know, a bit of a babbler. That's just sort of my personality. And two is when you're doing media day, you only have a certain amount of time. So you're wanting to get as much as you can out of there. So it's kind of tough to balance the two, but it's something like I needed to hear because in general, and I'm sure even on this show, I've kind of talked a bit too fast. It's something I have to remind myself to maybe just slow things down a little bit so it doesn't become distracting, you know, for certain viewers. So even myself, who's done as many interviews as I have, I still get the same criticism. So I wouldn't worry about that at all.
Yeah, I'm sure when I watch this clip back later, which I will because I'm a narcissist, because I think right now we're both talking normal speed.
Same here, but other people could think otherwise, right? So
I'll watch the clip back and I'll be like, "What are we doing?"
Yeah,
yeah, it's hard when you're in the moment. You're not thinking about that, and I'll tell you, Ariel and I, we didn't do any rehearsal before, so. You know, he just told me, look, it's like you just told me for this. We're just having a conversation. We're two guys talking about MMA, right? No big deal. That's how we got our job. That's the business we're in. How hard is that, right? So I had to be on my toes. He's coming at me with questions. Again, nothing, you know, he's not throwing anything crazy at me. And if anything, I feel like he respects that he can ask me at least some questions which require some serious thought, and I won't be caught off guard. And again, we can always reshoot. Fortunately, we did not need to. One take Alex. That's what they used to call me in school. Or that's what I called myself anyway. And yeah, it was very fun to do, and it turned out mostly okay. But you know, when you're being filmed by people with that kind of talent, you're gonna look good no matter what. So.
You did a great job. I'm not just saying that because you were on here. I thought you did a good job. You know, so I find I've talked about this on the show before. I find there's a lot of writers who just go on camera and think they're automatically good. And the fact that, you know, I thought you were good and you're still, you know, trying to find ways to, you know, improve, I think is the right attitude towards it. I find there's a bit of arrogance with some writers when they're on camera sometimes. So that's good. You know, even me, I've got stuff to work on. It's not like I'm an expert. So that's something to sort of consider. So let's go ahead to, you know, the weigh-ins. Not much, I mean, other than, you know, I had heard leading up to the weigh-ins from a couple sources that Henry Cejudo was having a tough cut, but he ended up making the weight. No controversy there. Of course, there was the thing with Aldo somehow weighing 1 pound less, and then they put the towel on. That's in itself. So nothing too crazy from the weigh-ins. I didn't go to the actual weigh-ins, the ceremonial weigh-ins, just because I can't really film anything, and you know they made weight, so there's not much to do there. But let's talk about the actual fight night. What were you? I know you were cage side. You were doing like play-by-play and stuff like that. How was the event? You know, for being cage side and comparing that to say 206 when you first went?
Well, the thing I'll say is, and I realize this is 206, and really every live event I've ever been at, which is not that many. I can probably count the amount of live events I've been at on both hands. So, but you really, I feel like you can judge fights better. I know judges get a lot of crap. You know, there's a lot of criticism of judges for getting things wrong and stuff like that. But definitely seeing fights live, you get a better idea for things. And also, I remember, and you see a lot of the details that you wouldn't see on TV. And at the same time, you probably miss some details. But one of the things was, I remember the Charles Oliveira Paul Felder fight. This really stands out to me was Oliveira had him on the ground. He throws his knee while they're both, they're both down on the mat. And for sure, I can imagine, I hear the crowd go like, oh, like, what is that? I was fortunate to be, or we were, anyone who's sitting on the media row, from the angle we could see, we definitely saw that it hit him in the chest. So it's little stuff like that where it's funny. At home, I probably would have been the same way with the crowd. I would have been like, there's Charles Oliveira kind of being like a head case again and throwing some weird, bizarre, illegal strike. But there you could see the difference. And again, obviously also just feeling the impact of things. I mean, the Ngannou knockout was just terrifying if you were there. Oh my gosh, as soon as it happened, my mouth was agape. All professionalism went out the window. I was just in shock. So yeah, the live experience is really different. And yeah, it was great to be able to be there and be that up close to it.
How late were you up on Saturday, and when did you get back to Toronto on Sunday? I'm curious.
Well, my hours are really messed up anyway. I was just recently traveling, and that's not even an excuse. Before that, my hours are messed up. The creative process is a mysterious one, James, as I'm sure you know, and you find yourself, I mean, I know you have a kid now, so you're probably a little more structured. You have another person sort of dictating your behavior.
Schedule. Yeah, it's true, yeah.
But I'm up late a lot anyway, so I must have been up to maybe 4:35 in the morning that night, maybe a little bit later than that, and slept in as much as I could. But then I got kicked out of my hotel room, so I got to walk around the city. It was a beautiful day on Sunday. So yeah, the weekend was just delightful. It was great.
Did you get up to anything outside of the media stuff? Did you get to go check anything out while you're in Detroit, or was it just go to the event, stay in your room, do a hotel, do work on stuff in the hotel? What was sort of the? Did you get up to anything outside of things?
Esther Lynn, bless her heart, she's the adventurous one, so she would always recommend coffee shops to check out and restaurants. So a few eateries and things like that. But no, I very much limited my experiences, which is one of my regrets. I know you said like, oh, the Red Wings game had sort of interrupted your workflow, but I really do wish I'd gone to see the Suns. I guess the Suns would have been impossible. We were at the workouts pretty late, or at least we would have missed most of the game. But yeah, I should have done something Detroit-y, as it were. And again, that's something I'll learn now that I know where you can fit in time to work and where you have free time. Hopefully, if I do get sent out and assigned again, I'll be able to squeeze in some sort of local entertainment, things like that. So. Yeah, you regretted going to that game a little bit. I regretted not going to anything. So.
Fair enough. No, absolutely. Did you get to any like interesting restaurants? This one place I got to give them a shout out. The Basement Burger Bar, right across the street from the hotel I was staying at. Really good burgers, very unique menu. I think I went there 3 times while we were there, just because I really enjoyed it. Just a very like kind of like almost like the Works a little bit. Have you ever been to the Works in Toronto?
Yeah, I think that, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but just, different variety of stuff, and just a really good spot. I also went to a barcade. The guy I was with, who, Steve Jeffrey, who, went down with me for Media Week and was covering the event as well. We hit up a barcade that had, all the old games, Street Fighter, NBA Jam, all that stuff. So we got to do that as well. And then we went to a really good breakfast place about 15 minutes away from the DoubleTree where the fighters were staying, called Parks and Rec. And I had just a phenomenal breakfast and really cheap. I think it was like $12 or something for like a really solid, meaty breakfast. So I got to give a shout out to both those places, because there's one thing I like doing when I go to these cities and going to events is trying to find different spots. So I definitely got to hit them up. But you said you went to a couple coffee shops. Did you go to any places, as far as like, restaurants or anything?
Yeah, I went to a good restaurant. The name escapes me, unfortunately. We also went, but the coffee shop we frequented a couple of times was the Roasting Bean. And
okay.
I don't know if that's a Michigan thing or a Michigan-only franchise or Detroit-only franchise. So forgive me if these things are everywhere. But yeah, Roasting Bean we thought was a very solid place. Good ambiance, good coffee. I don't have coffee, but my peers seemed happy with it. And good internet, most importantly, when you're trying to do work after an event. So Roasting Bean gets my endorsement, yeah.
I got to mention quickly Friday night. So I think, Friday, between basically the early morning weigh-ins Friday and Saturday, I get all this free time because I have all my work done. I do a little video for the early morning weigh-ins, and then, I don't have to do anything till Saturday. So, of course, Friday night after a long nap, I went out on Friday, and I actually went out for dinner. I'll give him a quick shout out in here. Mo Shatri, he's a lightweight fighter from Michigan. I've known him quite well. He was like, hey, let's go for dinner or something like that. I know there might be a little conflict of interest there, but, he wanted to show me, a good spot for dinner. So I went out for dinner with his fiance, and Steve and I both went, and we had a really good time and sort of, talked a bit about, him training at Michigan Top Team and sort of his future. He's an up and coming fighter. So, and I've interviewed him a handful of times. So I figured it'd be good to sort of, do that as well. And so we did that. And then a bunch of us went to the DoubleTree where the fighters were staying and watched the Tough finale. So that was kind of a neat experience. And when I tell you everyone was there, everyone was there. Bruce Buffer was there. Robin Black's there, who good friend of mine, I'm sure you know as well. Robin, Mick Maynard's there. There's all these managers there. There's fighters there who aren't even competing on the card. Tyron Woodley was there. Kamaru Usman was there. So we're all in this hotel bar, and we're all watching the Tough finale, and it was kind of neat. And one cool moment for me, and I talked about it on Twitter if anyone saw my feed, is Gerald Mearshart, who I've interviewed a handful of times, even dating back to before he got in the UFC. He fought Eric Spicely, and I'm in the bar, having a drink, and Duke Rufus is beside me, who's his coach. And watching Duke react to Gerald winning the fight was one of the coolest things of the weekend, just getting to see that and him sort of, moving his arms around kind of like Chuck Liddell does when he watches a fight. And that was super cool to see, just the reaction of him seeing Gerald win a pretty big fight against Eric Spicely. So little things like that were really neat to, kind of get to see the fighters outside the cage, see them, kind of watching fights and enjoying fights. And that was definitely a highlight of the weekend for me as well. So yeah. If you're ever going to these fight cards and covering it, find the Fighter Hotel. Guaranteed there's some downstairs watching some fights. We got lucky because, obviously they don't have fight cards on a Friday, so it was kind of neat to see them check that out as well. Last sort of thing on 218, was there anything you sort of took away the most from the card? Anything you kind of wish you would have done differently? You mentioned, maybe not getting to do some of the sites and stuff, but was there anything maybe from a media standpoint that you wish you would have done better, or some things that you were very happy with from the event?
Yeah, overall, I'm happy with how it went. but I definitely, I mentioned being aggressive before, and I wish I'd gone in with a little more confidence, you know. Even though I say I could have used more guidance, I think in our field, a lot of it's independent. A lot of it's independent motivation. No matter what outlet you're with, you know, like you said, they might ask you, for example, ask a few wrestling questions, right? That's some guidance you got from Fightful. But other than that, they trust you as a professional to handle the beat on your own. You know, they know that you have the skills. That's why they sent you out there, and you know, that's why they trusted me too. So I do feel like I just wish I'd done more. I always feel like I could do more. I didn't get any comment from that. You know, I haven't got any comments saying, oh, you know, where's this, where's that, where's this content? But in my head, I feel like could I have talked to this person? You know, I'll think about a fighter who I know I didn't interview, and you know, Ariel got everyone, thankfully, so we have content from all the fighters. But I had to tell myself, could we have had a little more? Could there have been a quote I could have gotten maybe that Ariel didn't get the chance to get? But in the time, it went by. It just felt like it went by very quickly in the moment, and so just wanting to do more, just feeling like there's always more we could have done, and maybe a question I could have asked here, a question I could have asked there, something I should have followed up on. Again, you've done a lot of interviews, you know, you always feel like, why didn't I say that? Why didn't I? You're listening to the transcript, and you're like, why didn't I pick up on that? You know, so yeah, regrets that I typically have, but even more so during fight week. But other than that, no, it was so enjoyable, and yeah, definitely, I really enjoyed it. You know, I also did the post-fight show.
That's right.
And that I felt so much better about it. Again, still so much to learn, but I had been thinking about how displeased I was with my debut. I'm like, I want to do at least a little better. You know, if it's even a little bit better, then I'll be happy. And I think it was a little better. And hopefully the next time, if there is a next time that I'm on camera, it'll be just a little bit better as well. Until, you know, just keep getting a little better, a little better.
And that's why those moments of being overcritical of yourself are actually good, because it just makes you want to do that much better the next time. I mean, I've had interviews where, you know, I forgot to ask something, or I stumbled on something, and it's like, okay, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen the next interview. And because I do so many, that happens frequently. So it's you know, sort of a good thing to have. Very last thing on the event, what was the feedback like from your peers and sort of, you know, your coworkers and everything like that? I imagine it was pretty good, because, you know, from what I saw, I mean, we didn't hang out too much during the media week just because we had our own things going on. It seemed like everything went really well for you.
It was good. It was good. You know, just some messages from some of the other MMA fighting guys saying you did a good job with previews and things like that, and good job with coverage. And I was, you know, thank you and all that. And again, getting to meet just some faces who I know from Twitter and know from online, but you know, on the last night, like, I'm so bad at introducing myself to people. So really, it wasn't until the last night I finally, you know, got off my butt and started saying hi. I'm with MMA Fighting now. I'm kind of the new guy there. Damon Martin, you know. Mike Dice. I'm sure I'm forgetting people, but really everyone I met, just nice people, hardworking people, and it was nice to put a face to the Twitter account, as it were. You know, so.
Now, this is an example of Alex being overly critical of himself, because I'd say Alex does one of the best jobs when it comes to networking. I remember you at the Mayweather presser and you introducing yourself to pretty much everyone, and that's a good skill to have. And it's not, here's the thing, there's a difference between kissing someone's ass and actually being genuine and actually wanting to know what they're about. And you do a very good job of that. And that's going to sort of bring me to my next point here, because you've got a pretty interesting career. We've got, you know, just over 20 minutes left here in the show. And I did want to talk about sort of your background in the industry. Normally, you know, I start the show off by doing that, but we had to talk about 218. And you have a really interesting story to me, because, you know, you're one of the guys who's been covering the sport for a little period of time, but you're working at the best site, you know, in the business at MMA Fighting. And it's pretty great to see. And I think when everyone saw you get the job, the consensus was this couldn't have happened to a nicer guy and a better guy for all the work you were doing. But when did it sort of start for you as far as your interest in mixed martial arts? I know you also like pro wrestling. Where did that sort of begin? And then we'll sort of go along the timeline of how you ended up at fighting.
Now I'm glad I took notes. First of all, I disagree. I think when I got the job, most people were like, who is this person? Where did they come from? who is this guy? And I don't blame anyone, because I still consider myself to be fairly unknown in the MMA media sphere, and I'm working on fixing that. Definitely every day I want to become more well-known, and I want to do a better job. But yeah, I essentially did come out of nowhere. I was not so I'm a late bloomer with a lot of sports, James. I'm a huge basketball fan. Basketball is and MMA are like my life, you know. And I thought I was going to be a basketball writer. That's what was my goal for the longest time when I was growing up, when I was in high school and wanting to pursue writing. And even that, I was a late bloomer, and I probably didn't start really, you know, I'm like a lot of people. I watched Michael Jordan, things like that, but casually, you know. And as you got older, your interests become more specific, and you know, you're able to understand things more. So not until, I'm not one of those people who was like, oh, as a kid, I remember going to, the Sky, Rogers Sky Dome when the Rogers Center was a Sky Dome. And no, I don't have any of that nostalgia that drove me towards sports. It was something I discovered much later. And MMA, boy, people are gonna kill me now when they hear the first event I ever truly watched, aside from highlights from other shows maybe, was UFC 79. That was GSP Hughes and one of the fights that I still consider to be one of my all-time favorites, Chuck Liddell and Vanderlei Silva. I vaguely knew who these people were from my friends. A lot of my friends got me into MMA. And I never thought it would be a career. I just thought I'd kind of been, you mentioned pro wrestling. I think like a lot of fans, I kind of been moving on from pro wrestling. I'll always like it, but I kind of moved on a little bit. And there's a very logical connection, as much as some MMA fans try to deny it, between professional wrestling and MMA. So I got into that, and then shortly after, obviously Brock Lesnar came in, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Everything makes sense to me now. I know Brock Lesnar. I'm starting to get into MMA. And then the third event I watched was Anderson Silva and Dan Henderson, UFC 82. And so I got to watch one of the greatest guys of all time in his prime. And also one fight, which I'll never forget for some reason, Chris Lee and Alessio Sakara. So in these first three events, I saw all kinds of things. I saw the champion of GSP, one of the greatest of all time, Anderson Silva as well. I got to see the brawler, Chris Lee, who I still love to this day, one of my favorite fighters. I got to see the weird crossover stuff with Brock, and one of the biggest draws in MMA history, as I would later learn. And then from there, again, I'm not trying to get into his business, but I'm one of those people, when I get into something, man, I want to know everything about it. And thankfully we live in the internet age. You want to know about anything. And when you think about how MMA is, as a mainstream sport, is maybe only 30 years old. As a mainstream sport, obviously the martial arts date back centuries. But if you want to follow UFC, boy, it's right there for you. If you have the time and you have the dedication, it's right there for you. So I just ferociously started devouring everything I could learn about MMA. I had the dumbest opinions. I didn't know anything about anything. So if I didn't know, I go to my friends who know, like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? Why GSP say that after the fight? I don't get it. Why is he who's Matt Serra? Why is he calling out Matt Serra? Didn't he just beat up Matt Hughes? Yeah. So stuff like that would happen, and I'd ask, and I come up with the biggest idiot. Eventually my friends did not want to watch events with me anymore because I had so many questions. And or the opposite, once they started increasing the events, remember how rare UFC events used to be. They started increasing them, and I would just be like, oh, do you guys want to watch this random fight night and watch this Ultimate Fighter episode? And they're like, buddy, take a break. Take a break from MMA. Chill out. It's fine. There's stuff to do. But I couldn't do it. I got hooked so badly, and I tried to do everything I could learn. And I knew, and to this day, I know that I don't have that background that a lot of people have, where they're like, oh, they remember tape trading, Pride and staying up till this time in the morning watch Pride. I don't have that. I don't have those experiences. I have a different perspective on it. I probably have more objectivity when it comes to those things, for better or for worse. But definitely I try to educate myself as much as possible, and at some point start to realize, maybe this could be something I could write about. And I started doing that for Bloody Elbow. They have a fan post section, you can put up whatever you want. And I was doing, I'm a believer, James, and find a niche and fill it. And one of them was The Ultimate Fighter has fallen into such disarray and no one cares about it anymore. I'm still kind of a fan of the show. So I said, well, I'll just start writing about it. Who cares? You'd write about it. I'd see maybe 2 or 3 comments a week, but it was a way to keep myself regular and keep a schedule and learn how to stay on schedule. And every time I was on schedule, like I'd say, I want it on at the very worst, the next day after. And every time I missed it, I felt like crap. But every time I made it, I felt like, maybe this is what a professional writer feels like. So that was sort of the start of it. Again, starting very late in MMA, and then just writing about the Ultimate Fighter and playing around with styles and playing around with does this work? Does this work? Should I have this kind of voice? Should I be more formal, less formal? What do people think? And yeah, it's not the most exciting story, right? But it was just about finding something, and it just lit a fire under me, and then putting as much work as I can to catch up on with all these other people who have been following this sport for so long.
Yeah, that's interesting. And for me, it was, I tell this all the time. It was The Ultimate Fighter that actually got me into the sport. It was the first season. And it's funny you say basketball. I wanted to be a hockey broadcaster. So for me, it was, similar thing where this was sort of something that was very unexpected. So it's interesting to see where life sort of takes you. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you went to school at Centennial. Was that where you went? Or where did you go to University College?
So first off, I'm going to say my age right off the bat. I probably look a little bit younger than I actually am, but I'm 33 years old. I just recently turned 33. Age ain't nothing but a number. 33 years young, I should say. I feel like a young man. But so my first, undergrad, I went to UT. I was an English major. Like so many people coming out of high school with decent writing skills who don't know what they want to do. Oh, I'll study English. I'm sure it will lead to some sort of career. And of course it didn't. But it led to various other lessons which paid off later. I just didn't realize it at the time. And then you have to fast forward quite a few years to 2015, where yes, I went to Centennial College. They have a sports journalism program there. So I think it's a very good program. There with some caveats. There's some, I'm sure, because if you'll ask some of my classmates, it could be a little disorganized at times. And you definitely, it's one of those programs where you probably have to bring a lot, you have to put a lot into it, I feel like. But if you do, you can get a lot out of it. There's a lot of opportunities there. We had some great instructors. I'm going to rifle off some names. I had to write them down. Shai Davidi with the Blue Jays.
Oh, nice.
Who helped my interview skills. So he taught like interviewing and writing. And to this day, just fundamental stuff, basic stuff, James, but stuff that for me, I was like, oh, like, that's amazing. Like that's something probably thousands of people in the business know, but I'd never done it before. I had no idea. So I absorbed everything that guy said and everything he taught about writing. So some people helped with video, PJ Kwong, Kathy Barnes, Tony Ambrosio, a very respected.
I worked with Tony at the Score. Tony is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in the industry.
You must know him, yeah. So Tony, he instructed a class, and he's such a good guy, and really helped me define myself, because he referred to me as a glue guy, which some people would take that as an insult, like, oh, that means you're not a star or whatever. But for me, that was such a compliment, because that is how I kind of made my name in my class. I'll tell everyone, I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the. I don't think I'm the hardest. I think I work hard. I'm not the hardest working guy. I'm not the funniest guy. I'm not the best looking guy. But I thought, like, I'm going to at least try and be good at those various things, and back people up and help this person and help this person and make this project better if I can. And he noticed that, and he said, you're a glue guy. And I said, to this day, I feel like I'm a little bit of a glue guy. That's kind of the role I have. So Tony Ambrosio was great. We got to work a little bit with Jim Taddy, and the little point, he's a legend up here in Canada, broadcasting legend. Yeah. And the little just tips he'll give you here and there, I think they really helped, and I thought about them this weekend. So a lot of stuff like that. And I had to give two special thanks. The man who runs the program, a great writer, Malcolm Kelly, who's worked with CBC for many years. A great writer. He runs the program. Very hardworking man. He's a funny guy, and I'll tell you. He'll challenge you, but also he cares. He really genuinely cared about everyone in the program, and that goes a long way. When you're so new to something and you don't know, you have no idea what you're doing, it goes a long way. Some of the other people in the program who might have known more than me might have been frustrated with maybe the way some of the classes were structured, but for someone like me who was so green, everything seemed important, everything seemed interesting.
Yeah, you got to take advantage of every opportunity you have, whether it's organized or not organized. You have to sort of make it work for yourself, and you've certainly done that. And of course, that led to, I'm sure there's some other things we're missing in between, but you worked at the Score. And when I think of the Score, I think of when the MMA, their MMA coverage was, one of the best, even outside of, just Canada. I mean, we're talking even before MMA Fighting. The Score had, the MMA show every week with Mauro Ronaldo. They had, the radio show as well, which my good friend Adam Martin was, a producer on that show. I know Aaron Bronstetter, who you mentioned as well, also worked at the Score during that time. So there was this huge sort of boom with the Score. And then once they got bought out by Rogers Sportsnet, the Score went away, and their MMA coverage and even them doing events just evaporated. And then there was a resurgence, and you were part of that resurgence as, being part of the MMA coverage. So how did you end up getting the job, and what was sort of you talked a bit about it there earlier about sort of the day-to-day, but how did you get the job, and what was it like, working there?
See, so this is a situation where the old adage of, preparation and opportunity meeting equals success, right? Yeah. So I'll tell you something. I'm one of the luckiest people in the industry. I got a lot of luck. Okay, so I get the internship right out of Centennial College. Again, great things to Centennial College. That's part of the program is, setting you up with an internship. So I ended up getting set up with the Score. I was working under another writer named Kyle Smith, heck of a guy. And then after a while, they offered me the part-time. Well, what happened was, they offered me a part-time job. Mm-hmm. And then Kyle left about a month or two after I got the part-time job, and they said, well, do you want the full-time job? So within a matter of months, right out of school, I was fortunate. And it's funny because, again, since I thought I was going to do broadcasting, I was like, oh, should I have gone to Sportsnet? Should I have gone to TSN? But I realized internships there are a little more hands-off. Again, I'm sure a great experience, but you're probably not going to be doing on-cam stuff within 6 months of working, as an intern at Sportsnet, unless you happen to know somebody or something. So the Score turned out to be just right, and the opportunities just fell right in front of me. And again, I'm very lucky, but I was prepared. I made sure. I said, if they're going to give me this opportunity, I'm not going to let them down. You know, I don't want to be. I can't be wide-eyed all the time and be like, oh, I'm just so lucky to be here and I'm so happy to be here. I'm like, that's not why they're giving me these opportunities. They expect me to produce, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to overproduce. I'm going to overproduce from what they expect. You know, the other person I want to shout out, Centennial, and it relates to this, was the Hockey Night in Canada producer, Mark Askin. He came to talk to our classes on a handful of occasions. And if you ever heard that guy talk, it's like a preacher. He just inspires you to go out and you want to work in sports more than anything. And he always told us about the 6 Ps. Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. Pardon the language. And I stick to that to this day, because I would just go into work every day thinking I'm ready. I'm ready for anything. Anytime I got any advance notice on anything, it's like, just be ready. Be ready. Be as prepared as you can, especially with interviews. At the Score, the MMA department, we were one of the only groups that were fortunate enough to regularly get interviews. So we would get. So I don't care if I was interviewing, you know, Dan Henderson or Karen Melendez or, you know, Ben Askren, whoever it was. You treat that, when you're interviewing that person is the most important person in the world. Their story is so important. So that was part of it, is always be prepared and obviously respectful. And I don't know if you want me to get now into how I went from the Score to fighting.
Sure. Yeah. Well, whatever. I mean, we're just sort of, we got about 10 minutes left. So I figure we'll, you know, let's cover that. There are some more questions I had about the Score, but we can maybe get to those after. But
no, go ahead. You don't want to ask about the Score now, it's fine. Yeah.
Well, no, I was going to say, how did you go about getting interviews when you worked at the Score? Like, I know you had that relationship with Bellator where you're on the press list, like a lot of us are. How did you get the UFC interviews? How did you go about doing that?
So the UFC interviews were a little more sparse. I think early on we had a stronger relationship with them, but then there was unfortunately a shuffling in the UFC Canada offices. And I feel like, I don't know if it's just us, but definitely our outlet seemed to lose some access there. So we got a few UFC interviews early on. We always had more Bellator. And then for a stretch there, it was only Bellator. And I'll give a shout out to CJ and Danny from the Bellator PR department, 2 great guys to work with. And yeah, it was mostly Bellator stuff, and it was just handled through the office. They would just send us the list. And I would have to let someone know to contact them, you know. So there was a bit of a middleman there. But yeah, nothing too complicated. But I was very fortunate in the little time that I was there to forge a relationship with these guys. And I know that CJ was one of the people who, when MMA Fighting was putting out feelers, he was very, very kind and put my name out there. He said he really liked my interviews and put my name out. So I owe CJ a big debt of gratitude.
Yeah, so tell me about that, because one minute I see you at the Mayweather presser, and you know, you're repping the Score, and then shortly after that, I felt like it was maybe a week or two after that, we see you as the newest member of MMA Fighting, along with Pete Carroll as well. How did this all come together with you getting to work with them? I know you mentioned Bellator sort of aided in that, and you said the feeler and everything, but what was take me through the process of sort of how that all came together and you getting this dream job?
So I'm a very private person, James, and I'll also preach to people is I'll celebrate my successes, but not too loudly, you know, and also I'll dwell on my failures, but not too long as well, right? You know, everything has to be mature and moderate about. So what happens is I was at the Score and I get contacted just on a random day by a text from supposedly Ariel Helwani. Now, I've never, other than shaking his hand at the 206 event in Toronto, I had never met Ariel. I maybe had added him on Twitter at some point and had an exchange in that way. But as far as actually having any conversation or relationship with the man, I had none. So I thought, this is a joke. This is a friend of mine messing with me. All my friends know I work in MMA. They're just screwing with me.
Yeah.
But earlier that day, Mark Ramondi from MMA Fighting had followed me on Twitter. So I was like, okay, well, that's a good coincidence. And at the very least, I can send him a message on Twitter, you know, DM him and ask him, hey, is this true? Or I kind of got a message from someone saying they're Ariel. Is that accurate? Are you guys actually looking for people to help with the site? And he was like, yes, as far as I know, there are no Ariel catfishes out there. So yes, we are looking for help, and you know, it's fine to follow up on it. I'm like, okay, great. So I messaged Ariel back, and then he eventually hooks me up with the editor of MMA Fighting, Brian Tucker. And now every time I tell the stories, I think that was part of the test. I think if I had responded to the text right away, they would have been like, this guy has no journalistic skills. He believed it too quickly. He didn't. So I think they wanted me to investigate a little further. So that worked out. And there was no offer made right away, James. You know, it was just saying, hey, we've seen your stuff. We're aware of you. And for me, obviously, that was a thrill. I'm like, that's amazing, because at the Score, we didn't get a lot of immediate feedback. You know, I love working there, but one thing I will say as a writer, you don't get is a lot of feedback from the fans. You don't know if how hard your stuff is hitting, other than, you know, as long as you're still employed, then I guess that's a good sign, right? So yeah, I was just contacted and not given any guarantees. As far as I knew, I thought, oh, I must be one of 20 people they've spoken to. You know, I made no assumption that, like, oh yeah, they're trying to get me. No, they're trying to find people. I've just been contacted, as they have with anyone. But fortunately, I you know, hung in there, and then I didn't contact them. I wasn't bothering them every week, like, hey, so what's up with the job? No, just a couple weeks. I think I sent them a few articles and said, hey, you know, I know you said you want to see what's up, so I thought this was good. I thought this was good, things like that. Just give them a little poke every now and then. And a couple months later, they said, yeah, we want to bring you on. I said, that's amazing. Things went very smoothly with the score. They were very classy about my departure. I have nothing but good things to say about the score. And yeah, then suddenly I'm part of MMA Fighting and working alongside some of these names that I've been reading and admiring for so long. And it's a bit crazy. And it was at its most surreal, as you said, you know, last Friday when I'm doing the preview show with Ariel. And I'm just like, wow, this is exciting. You know, this is someone I've admired for so long, and I've seen other people doing the preview show with Ariel, and now I'm the guy doing the preview show with Ariel. And you know, I don't know how it happened, but as I said with the score, all I want to do is reward them for their faith and just keep getting better and you know, show that I deserve to be at MMA Fighting. So.
Awesome. We got 5 minutes left, but I'm actually going to wrap up the show a little bit early. And I did want to ask you one more question. I actually have an interview in 5 minutes, actually a good one, which I'll plug at the end here. But the piece of advice that you give to those who are watching, I mean, you're a great example of someone who's, you know, really, you know, done a fantastic job in a short period of time, and you've really risen to the top. What's the one piece of advice you'd give someone that's out there that's looking to get into the industry and, you know, trying to achieve the level of success that you have?
I'll give you two quick pieces. The first one is, one, don't be like me. First, don't be like me. Not really, you know, don't be like me. Don't wait. I'm very lucky. I have an amazing amount of support from, and I have my whole life from friends and family. Financially, very comfortable. You know, not rich by any means, but certainly comfortable. You know, so I could have afforded to take my time. But I'll say for people out there, again, if you're younger, don't be like me. Jump with those opportunities when you want to. You know, if that means going to a college instead of university, if you think that's for you, you know, do that. Don't be, you know, don't feel like you have to follow what people tell you, like, oh, this school's better. But if it's not what you want to do, go to the school that has the program you want. Do that. Be specific. Be as specific as you want early on. You'll always, if it doesn't work out, you'll always have time. And that's my second piece of advice is, I was 30 when I finally decided I'm going to pursue MMA journalism. I'm just going to go for it. If it doesn't work out, at least, you know, later in my life, I'll know I tried. I gave it a shot. You know, I would have regretted it forever if I had not done that 1 year program and that internship at the score. Even if I hadn't gotten hired by the score, you know, it was even if my story was just, yep, I got to do a year of this great program and 6 months at the score as an intern and a part-time worker, and then they got rid of me. I would always be able to look back on that with pride. I would always say I did it. You know, I was in the industry for however long, and fortunately, I can say I'm still in the industry. But I'll tell people, you know, one, don't start late. But two, if you do start late, don't give up. You know, we live in an age where it's really easy to catch up, I feel. You know, maybe not for everyone. You know, I know everyone's got different struggles, different responsibilities. But if you're in that situation where the only thing stopping you is you, and it's this mental block you have, it's like, just challenge yourself and take them one little victory at a time. One little victory, you know, and don't let the setbacks push you back too much, because it adds up. It adds up, and you don't know what can happen. So, you know, that break will come. You know, that break will come if you put that work in. And just be ready for it. That's the only thing you don't want to be is not prepared when that break comes. You know, that's the scariest thing. But if you put that work in, it'll happen for you. So that's probably the advice I can give you.
Great advice. And it was great having you on the show, Alex. Honestly, it was good to catch up with you. And I really felt this interview was very informative for those who are looking to cover Fight Week and also get a little bit of background on you. Just remind people where they can find you on social media, and let us know what you got coming up this week on MMAfighting.com.
You can follow me at Alexander K. Lee on Twitter. I don't really have much of a social media presence outside of that. And you can find my articles at MMAFighting.com. That's correct. I've got something with Alex Perez coming up soon. He's making his debut at UFC Fresno, so I've got a little interview feature with him coming up. Otherwise, just regular coverage. And I think I'll be, you know, helping to keep up with the Bellator, Vans, and Victa. A lot of good fights coming up this week. So just staying on that grind, and otherwise nothing special. But James, thanks. I want to say thank you again so much for having me. It really is an honor, man, and I really appreciate all the help you've given me. You're definitely one of the names that I think of when I think, like, man, who helped me figure out how to work in this crazy industry. You're up there, and you're still helping me to this day. So I really appreciate that.
And you're helping me, man. I always see those retweets from you, and they definitely go a long way. So I certainly appreciate you coming on and telling your story. Everyone knows you can find me on Twitter at Lynch on Sports. I've got a bunch of interviews coming up this week, and of course Friday I will be in Montreal covering TKO 41, which is their biggest card of the year. They got 5 title fights. It's taking place at the Bell Center. Look on MMAOddsbreaker.com for all the coverage there. And of course, if you haven't already checked out my coverage this week on Fightful.com, I was there at UFC 218. Got a ton of interviews. Check that out. I'll also be doing a ton of interviews this week. Just sort of on my own. But I got to go because I got to do some more interviews. But thanks everyone for watching. Please give me your feedback on this episode and all our episodes. We really appreciate it. And have a great day, guys. We'll be back next week. Perfect.